Every group has one. The one who walks into a room and immediately makes it lighter. Who finds the joke in the silence before the silence gets uncomfortable. Who takes the worst moments, the awkward ones, the painful ones, the ones where nobody knows what to say, and turns them into something everyone can breathe inside of. People love this person with a particular kind of intensity, not just because they are funny, because they make being around them feel safe, easy, like the weight of being human is somehow more manageable when they are in the room. His name was Danny, and every person who knew him will tell you the same thing, that he was the funniest person they had ever met, that being around him felt like being let off a hook you didn't know you were on, that rooms genuinely changed when he walked into them. They will also tell you that they never really knew him, that now, looking back, they cannot identify a single conversation where he talked about something real, where he let the joke drop long enough for anything underneath it to show, where he needed something from the room instead of giving everything to it. They thought that was just who he was, the funny one, the light one, the one who didn't need the things other people needed because he was too busy making sure everyone else was okay. It wasn't who he was, it was what he had learned to do so early and so completely that by the time he was an adult, there was almost no visible distance between the performance and the person. Almost. Danny was 7 when he made his mother laugh for the first time in months. He had been going through something. She didn't have the words for it then, and she never gave him the words for it later. What he knew, the way children know things without being told, was that the house had become a place where the air was different, heavier, where his mother moved through rooms like someone underwater, where the wrong word at the wrong moment could make everything worse in ways he felt but couldn't predict. He did a voice, something he had seen on television, exaggerated just enough, and she laughed, a real laugh, sudden, surprised, briefly unguarded, and the air in the room changed. He felt it in his whole body, the shift, the relief, the specific and overwhelming satisfaction of having fixed something that had been wrong, using nothing but himself. He felt that feeling away, not consciously. Children don't make conscious strategic decisions. They find what works and they repeat it. And what worked, what reliably produced warmth in a house that had gone cold, what reliably made his mother present again, what reliably turned tension into something survivable, was making people laugh. So he got very good at it, practiced it the way other children practiced football or piano, refined it, expanded it, learned to read the room the way a musician reads an audience, sensing where the resistance was, where the opening was, how much to push and when to pull back. By the time he was 12, he was the funniest kid in school. By 16, the funniest person most people had met. Nobody asked what he had needed at 7. Nobody asked what it had cost him to become so good at making sure everyone else was okay. He wouldn't have been able to answer anyway. He had stopped being able to locate the cost a long time before anyone thought to ask. He has a specific interest in humor, not in what makes things funny, but in what humor does for the person deploying it. Because humor is not just entertainment, it is one of the most sophisticated psychological defense mechanisms that exists, and unlike cruder defenses, denial, aggression, withdrawal, it is one that the people around you will reward, will love you for, will actively encourage you to maintain. Here's what the joke actually does. In the moment before pain, or vulnerability, or the admission of something real, the joke steps in front of it, intercepts it, transforms it into something the room can receive without discomfort, something that produces connection rather than the terrifying exposure of being genuinely seen. For Danny, every time someone asked how he was, every time a conversation moved toward territory that might have required him to say something true, the joke arrived automatically. Before he decided to make it, before he even registered that there was something underneath it that might have wanted to be said instead. The defense was so fast, so practiced, so completely integrated into how he moved through the world that it had become invisible, even to him. What nobody around him understood, what is impossible to understand from the outside of this, is that the joke was not a choice. It was a reflex, built in childhood to manage a specific threat, now firing automatically in response to anything that felt like exposure, like need, like the possibility of being in a room and having nothing to offer except the uncomfortable reality of being human and struggling. The laughter Danny produced was real, the connection the room felt was real. None of that was performance in the cynical sense. But it was a wall, the most beautifully constructed, universally admired, socially rewarded wall that psychology has ever documented. And on the other side of it, completely alone in a way that nobody in those laughing rooms ever suspected, was a person who had needed something for a very long time and had no idea how to ask for it, who had in fact spent so many years perfecting the art of making need invisible that he had lost the ability to feel it as need at all. He felt it as something else, as a low, persistent, sourceless exhaustion, as the specific tiredness of someone who has been performing without an interval for 25 years. As the sensation arriving most powerfully in the silence after the room had emptied and the laughter had faded, of being completely, utterly, unreachably alone. The cruelest thing about this particular defense is what it does to the people who love the person using it. It makes them feel like they know him, like they are close, like the ease and warmth and laughter of being around him is intimacy, when what it actually is the most sophisticated possible way of ensuring that intimacy never quite arrives. Danny's closest friend, someone who had known him for 18 years, said afterwards that he had assumed Danny told him everything, that their friendship was the kind where nothing was off limits, that looking back, he could not find a single moment where Danny had been genuinely vulnerable. Not one. 18 years. And every conversation had been warm, funny, easy, and utterly, carefully, imperceptibly surface. He hadn't known, he had felt close. That was the point. The joke creates the feeling of closeness while preventing the thing that actual closeness requires, which is the willingness to be seen without the performance, to need without apologizing for it, to sit in a room and say, "I'm not okay," without immediately following it with something that lets everyone off the hook of having to respond. Danny never sat in a room and said that, not once, in 41 years. Not because nobody would have listened, but because the 7-year-old who learned that his value in a room was contingent on what he could produce for it, had never been shown that a room could hold him when he had nothing to give. He did not know that was possible, it had never been demonstrated. After Danny died, his friends gathered in the way people do. They told stories, they laughed. Because of course they laughed. That was what being around Danny had always meant. They said he would have wanted it that way. And then someone said something that made the room go quiet. She said, "Did any of us actually know what was happening with him? Did any of us ever ask, really ask, in a way that made it clear that the answer didn't have to be funny?" The silence that followed that question was a different kind of silence from the ones Danny had spent his life feeling. It was the silence of people realizing, too late, that they had loved someone without ever making the specific kind of space that would have let him be known, that they had accepted the performance so gratefully, so consistently, that they had never thought to look behind it. Not because they were careless, because it was so good, because the performance was so complete, so warm, so genuinely generous, that it never once looked like it was. It looked like personality, it looked like joy, it looked like a man who had simply been given in abundance, the thing most people spend their whole lives wishing they had more of. It was none of those things. It was a child's solution to an adult's pain, running uninterrupted for 34 years, in a body that had long since run out of the resources to sustain it. Think about the funniest person you know, not casually funny. The one who is always funny, who never seems to have a moment where the joke doesn't arrive, who you have never seen genuinely lost for words in the face of something painful, who makes every hard thing lighter and every awkward silence disappear, and who you would describe without hesitation as one of the most easy people you have ever been around. When did you last ask them something they couldn't answer with a joke? When did you last sit with them in silence long enough for something real to surface? When did you last make it clear, not by asking how they are in the way that expects fine, but by staying in the room after the laughter stopped, that you were there for whatever was underneath? The funny ones are not lighter than everyone else. They are not less burdened. They learned, earlier than most, that the burden was more acceptable to the people around them when it is wrapped in something that made those people feel good. They have been wrapping it ever since, and every time the room laughed, every time the joke landed and the tension broke, and everyone felt the particular relief of being let off the hook, they felt it too. The relief of having made themselves useful enough to stay. Danny was the funniest person anyone knew. Nobody knew Danny. Those two things were not a coincidence, they were the same thing.